Last week we heard the Easter story as told by the Gospel of Mark. Because there were longer liturgical elements and multiple songs on Easter Sunday, I reduced the sermon to fit the internet time frame. This week I would like us to return to that very same Easter Sunday text as though we didn't already know how it ended. I want to do so because I think that the story of that first Easter has yet more insight for us to gain if we don't leave it too quickly. We begin in the graveyard. The women were coming to the tomb because they had accepted death as a fact of life. These are wise women. They are not in denial. They are not collapsed into a bubbling heap like Peter the rock was when we last saw him. They're not locked in their rooms in fear like the men are. They go out. They face reality after Jesus' death to do what they could to give him a decent burial. Now, what could the women possibly expect to see in that tomb other than the dead body of Jesus? They had spent their Saturday night preparing spices to embalm Jesus' body. They were preoccupied so much that the much bigger problem of that immovable slab of stone didn't even cross their minds till they were already on the way. Well, maybe they should have recruited Peter the rock and the guys to lend them some upper body strength. By working together, they might have rolled the boulder aside. But what could these women possibly expect to find when they got to the tomb, other than the fact that the rock had not moved because they'd seen it put in place on Friday? They did not expect to be surprised at dawn on that first Easter day. Surprised by the message that Jesus was not there, that he had been raised from death. Now wait a minute, you may say, as followers of Jesus from the very beginning in his public ministry in Galilee, these women would have seen normal expectations reversed many times. They experienced his miracles firsthand. So why not, again, be prepared for a surprise by Jesus on Easter Sunday? Ta-da! I'm back! And you know, it's true. We who have read the Gospel of Mark, we've been surprised quite often by the unexpected developments in Jesus' teachings, in his healings, his miracles, in how Jesus always seemed to be able to turn the tables on his accusers and the religious authorities. In fact, Mark used those same three verbs, phobos, ekstasis, chromos, as the response by the crowd to Jesus' miracles and teachings. Mark said the people were amazed, right? Ekstasis. Fear came upon them, phobos. And there was trembling and there was trauma, tromos. But now that Jesus has, for all intents and purposes, been stopped dead in his tracks, he's crucified, he's buried, what is there to wonder about? It's over. The journey to Jerusalem that Jesus began in Galilee ended on a Roman cross. Not only Jesus, but it looks like his movement had been killed, dead. The disciples know this, that's why they mourn. And the women know it too. That's why they're bringing spices to bury him. They expected death on that Easter day, but what they encountered was life. And the question that I asked you last Sunday is, what do you believe? What do I believe? Can our normal expectations of life and death be opened up? Will we risk trusting God beyond everything that we thought was possible? Or have we become so convinced that death is the final frontier beyond which there is no life? There's no further possibility. Have we become so convinced that death is the great divide across which no bridge may span, and there's no possibility of reversal, there's no exit, there's no return? I asked you last week, what do you think? Can we be surprised by God yet one more time? Is the future open Or is it all settled and closed? Well, the women, alarmed by the sudden unexpected change, run away. And in fear, they say nothing to anyone. With that, the book is closed. It's done. Done. The story ends with ambiguity, uncertainty, possibility. This is no way for a tragedy to end, because it breaks all the conventions. It upsets our expectations. It leaves us simply hanging. But obviously, Mark thought this is a perfect way for his gospel to end. This abrupt ending fails to satisfy us because it leaves the future open, undecided, uncertain. You know, many people prefer closure as opposed to leaving things open. I'm tempted to pause for a moment here to talk about people who, by temperament, prefer that things be settled at the end of the day. The Myers-Briggs Temperament Analysis Test would give these kind of people the initial J for judging. Myers-Briggs, if you want to read more about it, please understand me. Character and Temperament Types by David Kiersey and Marilyn Bates, an excellent treatment of the Myers-Briggs. And also another one, a popular one, Type Talk, the 16 personality types that determine how we live, love, and work based on the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator by Otto Kruger and Janet Tuzin. The question you ask yourself is, how do I prefer to live my outer life? If you prefer to have matters settled, if you think that rules and deadlines should be respected, if you prefer to have detailed step-by-step instructions, or if you make plans, you want to know just what you're getting into, well, then your preference would be called by Myers-Briggs judging. You'd be given the letter J. And that's in contrast to if you prefer to leave your options open, if you see rules and deadlines as flexible, if you like to improvise and make things up as you go, or if you're spontaneous and you enjoy surprises and new situations, then you get the initial P for perceiving. There's no right or wrong personality types, but we're just different. We see the world through separate eyes. We have different inborn temperaments and tastes, and we come from different family systems which help mold us in certain ways. So as I said, I'm tempted to park and to preach about the strengths and the shadow side of preferring matters to be settled. But to do that takes away from the bigger question, and that is Easter really open-ended? Is life ongoing even beyond death? Or is that merely the way that Mark chose to end his gospel 2,000 years ago? I realize that many people have rejected any notion of the possibility of life after death. Even with all the evidence from parapsychology, such as the near-death experiences that Reverend Bob Case introduced to us in these classes last year, many people limit their view of life to those events that we experience here and now, between birth and death. And some of us may think that way because it just makes sense. I mean, dead things don't come back to life. Life ends with death. They may also simply believe that there's no valid reason to suppose that any other reality exists than that which we encounter on a daily basis. If there's any immortality, it would not be a resurrection, but a reabsorption of our bodies into the elements of ongoing processes of nature. As we say on Ash Wednesday, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Or as I say at every memorial service, at every graveside, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. These good folks who do not believe in life after death may also hold out some hope that there's a kind of immortality, however slight or short-lived, in simply the influence that our lives have made on others and on the future. There may be some lingering effects in the lives of our loved ones, or students that we have taught, or maybe artistic creations that we've produced. We may live on in the memories of the current generation who knew us until they too age out and succumb to inevitable death. To these very pragmatic, reasonable people, Easter does not indicate an open-endedness to life. They do not see in the story of resurrection any ongoing experience beyond the grave. No, they've made up their mind. Things are settled. Things are certain. Dead is dead. And so get over it. For most Christians, however, our hope is for new life, for a fulfilled and transformed kind of life, which continues after death, either immediately or at the end of time. For those who imagine an immediate transition from this life into the next, such as is portrayed in the book and the movie The Shack, or in Heaven is for Real and other Christian bestsellers, we see resurrection as a living example of that very process happening. And so they too will rise as Jesus did. We too will be transformed in the twinkling of an eye, putting on a celestial body of light. Those who understand resurrection as the Jews taught it in Jesus' day, it would simply be that all people would await a final judgment, and then they would rise together on the last day as a large community. I can support all three of those understandings of life